Greetings, leaders. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Leadership Is Podcast. I am your host, Jason Muhammad, founder of JM Leadership Consulting. Today's discussion, we're talking about shift. What is the definition of shift? Why do you need to make a shift? When do you need to make a shift? How do you make a shift, right? And what is the impact of your shift? Let's talk about that today. Greetings, leaders. Thank you so much for joining us for the episode of Leadership Is Podcast as we are discussing shift. What is shift? What is a shift? How does one make a shift? As I remind you every time I utilize a acronym in my podcast that I don't want to change your vocabulary but expand your dictionary. What I mean by that is we use words like shift, mindset, leadership, value, focus, passion, fear. We use these words every day as leaders. But when I create them into a acronym that can make the words more rooted inside of the leader's mindset, right? And then, of course, it expands the definition of that word. So when a leader is using this word, it can have a deeper meaning that can produce a greater effect for the leader as they are trying to relay whatever message they're trying to relay. So shift, SHIFT, when to make a shift, how to make a shift, why make a shift, what is a shift? To shift simply means to change. Why do leaders resist change? How to help leaders overcome the resistance of change. These are the titles of my last two podcasts that I did talking about change. There's two reasons why leaders resist change. And then, of course, we gave reasons steps of how to help leaders to overcome change. If you would like to listen to those podcasts, they are the previous two podcasts before this one here. Why leaders resist change, how to help leaders overcome the resistance of change. So please go back and listen to those. There are two different types of shifting that we want to talk about here today. So there are two different shifts that an employee or a leader is going to make, or even a hidden leader or individual contributor is going to make here. The first one is shifting into a leadership position. When an individual contributor or a high potential employee is making the shift from being an individual contributor or a high potential employee into a leadership position, they are displaying three mindsets of next generation leaders. Those three mindsets are adaptive, innovative, and connecting. Why adaptive? Well, we're living in a time where COVID-19 has produced not only a health-wise pandemic, but an economic pandemic. We're also living in a time where the George Floyd and other Breonna Taylor and other other senseless murders, right, have produced a somewhat of a civil unrest within this country. And so, therefore, this social injustice, right, is producing all of this protest and is actually shifting the mindset landscape, right, of America in general, right? People are fighting for equal rights, civil rights, justice. And so, with this being said, right, it's producing a whole lot of anxiety, right, within this country. Then 42% of Americans are feeling down. And part of the reason why is because a lot of when this pandemic first hit, right, and it produced the first signs of the economic pandemic, a lot of people were furloughed from their companies. And then those that survived, right, or stayed back, they began to display symptoms of survivor's guilt, which is to simply say that they may have been thinking that they were more acceptable to being furloughed than watching their friends being furloughed, right? And so that's another story for another time. That's a whole nother mindset discussion that we would have to have, right? And so we're going to have that discussion pretty soon. So again, with this COVID-19 that has produced, this economic pandemic, which of course is beginning to lighten up a little, as here in the state of North Carolina, in the city in which I reside, Asheville, North Carolina, we are now in what is called phase 2.5. 2.5 simply means we're not at the full 3 or phase 3, right? But we have shifted, right? We have moved or changed from phase 2 going into phase 3, but we're shifting in between 3 and 2, right at 2.5. That means that a hotel who was normally able to do 100% capacity can now do, and was broken down to doing less than 50%, is now able to do 75 plus, right, a percent or of full capacity, but not quite at 100% full capacity. I drove through downtown Asheville, and unfortunately, what I saw was kind of disturbing. Even though the tourism has picked up, and of course the local companies are gaining a lot of a lot more economic development based on the shift that we're in with 2.5. But unfortunately, I did not see a lot of social distancing at 6 feet, and I did not see 100% of the people wearing their mask. And so, again, we would have to wait for the data analyst to configure the new numbers, right, after the 2.5 has been going on for quite a while, just to see exactly where we are. But again, that's a shift, right? And so that's a leadership decision, see, because the three mindsets of next generation leaders, right? It is adaptive, innovating, and connective, right? So leaders have to be adaptive according to the times in which they're in. They have to have enough flexibility in their mindset to be able to make the adaptive adjustments, right, in order to stay in the run as it relates to leadership and leadership development and productivity. And secondly, innovative. If you cannot adapt to the times, you cannot innovate, right? New processes and systems that can reinforce whatever new adjustments that you are making. So first, you have to be adaptive. Secondly, the adaptive leads into being innovative. And then, of course, you have to be connecting. You have to connect with your partners, strategic partners, with your investors, with your funders, with your clients, right? And of course, with your organization, with your department heads, and with your employees, right? In order to connect them with the innovation that you are relaying them in whatever form of message, or relaying the message, whatever form you're using, right? That shows that you are a great leader of that can adapt to the times. And so the first shift is for the employee shifting into a leadership position. The second shift is, when a leader is shifting to the next level. When a leader is shifting to the next level, you're going from one level to the next level. Now, we talked about this in our last episode of the MVP, right? So when a leader doesn't want to just be, like on the sports terminology, doesn't want to just be a player, but now he wants to be a most valuable player, right? Well, what makes a leader an MVP, right, is their mission, vision, and purpose. That is the MVP, right, values of a leader is the mission, vision, and purpose. And so therefore, when a leader is shifting, right, to the next level, that's what they're looking at. What is the mission? What is their vision, right? And what is the purpose and how can they increase on these things? And what that increase does is it increases their customer relations, their productivity and services, right? And it increases their bottom line. So the two different ways that we're talking about making a shift here is for the high potential employee or the hidden leaders, right, to actually shift into a leadership position, and then once they're into that leadership position, or those that have always been in leadership positions, shifting to the next level. So listen, we're going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we're going to go more into this whole shift idea. Thank you. Greetings, leaders. I'm here to talk to you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and or computer. Now, how convenient is that? Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast, too, with no minimum listenership. So it's everything that you need to make a podcast in one place. So do me a favor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I look forward to seeing the greatness within you. Hey, thank you so much for joining us or coming back with us for the episode of Leadership Is Podcast. We're talking about shift, and we talked about the two different shifts that will be made as it relates to leadership. Is number one, high potential employees going into leadership positions or shifting into leadership positions, and number two, leaders are deciding to shift to the next level, going to the next level. Now, there are two ways, right, of how leaders are going to make this shift. So the first one here we want to talk about is shifting gears, right? You know, you ever heard the statement that says you need to get in gear, or even you need to shift gears, right? Because sometimes when you're making moves, and especially when you have a coach, and leaders make the best coach. When you have a coach, right, your leader says, well, you need to shift gears, which means that your productivity, your momentum, your movement is not, moving in the pace by which the times dictate, right? So leaders have to shift gears, right? Get in the proper gear. When you're looking at a large vehicle, let's say, for instance, a commercial licensed vehicle, 18-wheelers even, right? Or transport trucks, that have these, that has cargo on it. So they have to shift their gears, but it really depends on the speed in which they need to go or are going, right? It depends on the direction that they're going. It depends on the weight and volume of the cargo and the vehicle itself. And it also depends on the road conditions, which are, almost 100% dictated by the weather. Right. And so these vehicles have to shift gears in order to maintain safety, maintain their proper speed, and even to maintain momentum. Right. These vehicles have to shift gears. And so that's the first way of how a leader is going to shift. Right. Is to shift their gears. The second one is shift work. Right? Or working on a schedule outside of the traditional 9 to 5. Right? So in the workforce, labor force, you have first shift, second shift, and third shift. Right? And so why do they have these different shifts? So that they can increase their manpower for more productivity, more output, right? Unfortunately, there is a danger in multiple shifts, and because one of the dangers is, as the World Health Organization has considered third shift itself as a carcinogen or cancerous causing, because it helps to fight it helps to break down the system's ability, the immune system to fight against outside forces that can cause cancer and other health risk, right? However, you don't have to work all shifts, but you have to make sure that all shifts are covered, right? So now, but what you have to do is look at shift work, and not only are you doing the shift work, but you're a shift manager, right? Or a shift leader. As a leader, you're leading the shifts that are actually working and taking place. And so you know, what shift are you going to actually be working on? That's up to you, right? But again, the two ways of how leaders are going to shift is you're going to shift gears and then you're going to shift work, right? So again, here let's talk about shift. As we stated in the beginning, I use the word shift as an acronym, SHIFT, right? That stands for set authentic goals, honor your commitments, influence top talent, focus on the future, and timing is critical. So, setting authentic goals. The first way that you set an authentic goal is you have to properly identify who you are or what kind of leader you actually are. There are many, analysis, SWOT analysis. There are many, type of assessments that you can find that can help you to truly identify Myers-Briggs, these personality and leadership type that you are. There's many resources out there. So the first one is you need to find out who you authentically are, right? The second one, which honor your commitments. When you honor your commitments, right, you build trust, you build influence, and then you build loyalty. When you honor your commitments, you build trust, you build influence, and you build loyalty. These are some of the primary focuses, right? So when we talk about a leader being MVP, the mission, vision, and purpose, right? And so these are some of the things that are incorporated or baked into that mission, vision, and purpose, right? Is to build the trust, build influence, and build loyalty, right? See, if and we're going to talk about how this actually plays a part into the customer, into your employee, because again, what we talked about our last podcast was with this customer first. They did a webinar and it was talking about the EX equals the CX, right? Means that the employee experience equals the customer's experience. So you as a leader, when you are in fact honoring your commitments, that builds trust, that builds influence, and that builds loyalty, right? So the impact that can have on your employees is great, right? I mean, it is absolutely great within itself. For instance, one of the ways that it happens is that 94% of the people who with great bosses feel passionate about their work. 20 to 60% these employees are more productive than those without a great leader, or those that don't honor their commitments, those that do not build loyalty, build influence, and build trust, right? And so what also happens here with it is, again, that great leaders know that change is inevitable, right? But the great part to it is that study shows that 92% of the consumers reported that an employee's perceived happiness had a direct impact on their customer experience and brand. So what does this mean? When you are honoring your commitments to not only to your customers, not only to your investors, but you're honoring your commitments to your employees, right? So when you are saying to your employees that X, Y, and Z is going to happen, or can happen, or will happen, and then you honor that commitment, what you're doing now to that employee is you're building trust, you're building influence, or increasing your influence, which in results to building more loyalty, right? So you're building more loyalty. That's what happens when you honor your commitments. Now, the I here is to influence top talent. influence top talent. I was watching a interview with Sean P. Diddy Combs, right, in the entertainment business with Ray Diallo, who is one of the top talent people and wrote the book Principles. A great book that he wrote there. He talked about how top talent got to have a top talent spec sheet, and a top talent spec sheet has three components to it, right? And so it has values, abilities, and skills. Values, abilities, and skills. That's what's in an employee. That's what's in an employee a talent spec sheet. Pardon me. I apologize. I did get distracted just then for a moment, but we're going to keep going. You're listening to a podcast being recorded live, so we can always go back and cut this part out. But why do so? It takes the human component out of it, right? Even though we're still giving you the information. So in what I wanted to share as far as it relates to values, page 14 in a book that is called The Future Leader by Jacob Morgan, which is an excellent book. I really, really, really highly recommend this book for people to read. In this book, he says that DDI found that 85% of executives are not confident in their own leadership pipelines. Then he says, here are a few other numbers for you to consider. In Deloitte's most recent millennial survey, which collected 10,000 responses from 36 countries, 71% of millennials said they are expecting to leave their employment in the next 2 years because they are unhappy with how their leadership skills are being developed. They are unhappy with how their leadership skills are being developed. And unfortunately, that Gallup has it in their book, It's the Manager, that states that, leaders promote the wrong talent in positions 82% of the time. So you got to look at, okay, how are you going to attract, right, the top talent? How are you going to attract the top talent? As I have stated before in numerous of my podcasts, DDI, Development Dimensions International, did a study. And in this study, with all of these 25,000 leaders, they came up with 10 challenges of leaders, right? And the number 2 challenge of leaders at 64% respondents, 60% of the respondents stated that obtaining and retaining top talent was their number 2 challenge. Obtaining and retaining their top talent was their number 2 challenge, right? So again, if you focus on influencing top talent, right, and developing, as Ray has said, a top talent spec sheet, right? And if you look at what these leaders value, right? They don't see in the early days with the baby boomers, right? What they focused more on was the paycheck, right? Because of the economic crashes of 1929, and then they were coming out of those economic crashes. But today's leaders, the millennials and even Generation Xers, they're not so concerned with the paycheck. They're looking at how their intellectual property is going to be valued and can it be inclusive in the decision making of the company, right? How do you value their leadership development? How do you value their input in how the company is being ran? That's what millennials value. That's what Generation Xers value. Is they want you to see them, right? All the perks. Remember, 58% of them would trade in their salary for a great boss. A great boss is one who recognizes what their potential is. See? So let's keep going here. The F in shift, right? Focus on the future. There are 5 keys to focus on the future. There's vision, preparation, action, review, and adjustments. Again, there's vision, preparation, action, review, and adjustment. These are the 5 keys of how you focus on the future. Now I'm going to read something to you once again from Michael Hyer's book, The Vision Driven Leader. On page 43 of his book, Michael talks about, vision here, right? And so I hope everybody's doing okay here. Let's continue this here. Michael says, being unprepared for the future means overlooking key opportunities in the present. Let me repeat that. Being unprepared for the future means overlooking key opportunities in the present. Why? Vision keeps us attuned to possibilities that align with the future we see. Without vision, those opportunities slide right by. So again, being unprepared for the future means overlooking key opportunities in the present. There is a statement that says, if you stay ready, you won't have to get ready, right? So focus on the future. Vision, preparation, action, review, and adjustment. And there's some more. We're going to do a podcast that talks about the future here and the future of work, right? We're going to talk about that. And then number 5, track your work means to set standards, create a leadership rubric and benchmarks, educate all on the standards, benchmarks, and the systems that's used to reinforce or to implement, right, your benchmarks, and then update your communication and systems as needed for everyone that it actually is going to be affecting, which is, of course, there are different ways of how you can do this. And different times in which you can do this, right? For your funders, for your partners, for your clients, right? For your employees, for your department heads. There are different times that you're going to do this. But again, you must do this. So let's talk about shift. Once again, SHIFT. When you're going to make this shift, you're going to, so there's 2 ways of how you're going to make this shift. You're going to shift gears, and then you're going to shift the work. Right? And so your shift here is you're going to set authentic goals, honor your commitments, influence top talent, focus on the future, and timing is critical, right? Timing is critical. Timing is critical here is how you actually track your work, right? So the timing is critical when you do that, when you relay that work, right? When you talk about that work, so timing is critical, and you're gonna track your work. So that's the T that's in there. We wanted to kind of put those 2 together there. So timing is critical and tracking your work. When you're tracking your work, you set up standards, create leadership rubric, educate all on the standards, and then update communication and systems as needed. That's where the timing comes in. Okay? So, hey, listen, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Leadership Is Podcast. I hope that you enjoy. So, thank you. Hey, thank you so much for enjoying another episode of Leadership Is Podcast. We talked about shift. There are 2 times that leaders are going to shift. They're going to shift when they're actually shifting as a high potential employee into a leadership position, and secondly, when they're actually shifting to the next level. There are 2 ways that they're going to make that shift. They're going to shift gears, right, as in first, second, or third gear, or shift gears. And the second way is they're going to shift their work, right? So you're going to choose which shift you're actually going to be working on. What is your shift work? Okay, so also remember that I work with emerging leaders, high potential employees, and students to develop and embrace a growth mindset for leadership. If you would like a presentation or keynote, your next event, please contact me via email, jason@jmleadershipconsult.com, or visit my website, www.jmleadershipconsult.com, and we will respond promptly. Please subscribe to this podcast using the Anchor app, or you can go to Anchor FM, or you can also use Spotify and Apple Podcast at Jason A. Muhammad /leadership is. Please follow us on social media. Twitter is @LeadershipJM. Facebook and Instagram is JM Leadership Consulting. You can even call us for a free half-hour consultation, 828-333-7234. And always remember, leadership is influence and service.